What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy, the Man Welding, and today I want to talk about the top 5 reasons why people fail in their attempts to get sober. Now, guys, this is a list that I came up with off the top of my head, just based off of my own anecdotal experience, what I've dealt with personally, and what I've seen in others. And I think it's pretty damn accurate, right? So let's just jump right into it. The first thing on my list of why people struggle and ultimately fail in their attempt to get sober is loneliness. You guys, this is a big one, and it often goes overlooked when people are trying to understand the reasons why they keep failing at their sobriety. And from what I've seen, loneliness is definitely a huge contributing factor. You guys, we all know people drink and use drugs for a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is to just cope with loneliness. Now, obviously, this is not applicable to every single person who struggles with alcohol, but I don't think it's uncommon at all. And a lot of times what happens is, especially older people who live alone, or maybe even a younger person who lives alone, right? They find themselves that they get extremely stuck in these routines. And from what I've seen, oftentimes that routine looks a lot like sitting at home, whether it's on the couch or in your bed, getting drunk and just watching TV and just mindlessly eating. And, that's about it. And it just keeps going night after night after night after night. And next thing you know, the years have passed by, and that's basically all you've done with your life, right? And it is an extremely lonely existence. So guys, human connection, having a social group, being an active participant in your community, it is such a huge factor in getting sober, right? And a lot of times, it's hard for people to put themselves out there and break free of their routine and stop isolating themselves. But in my opinion, it's absolutely necessary to get involved. And I don't mean just like getting out of the house once or twice a week for an hour or two. I mean, you really have to make a conscious effort to push past your comfort zone and get involved, whether it's through volunteering, whether it's through joining a team, or an organization, getting a part-time job, even if you're retired. And to even go further than that, I've heard it put that the best way to stay sober is to help somebody else get sober. So, do what you can to get involved and to help somebody else. And I think this helps for a couple of different reasons. One is that it just gives you something else to focus on, right? It's like if you don't have many obligations and you are the type of person who isolates yourself, you're going to have so much free time that your mind is just going to constantly revert back to drinking to deal with the boredom of being alone, or the feelings that you've been neglecting, or anything like that, right? So when you have a greater purpose in life, the things of lesser value tend to just fall away, and you don't have the time and the energy and the mental bandwidth to focus on them, right? So I think loneliness is a huge problem for people struggling in their sobriety. And if it applies to you, then you need to really be honest with yourself and come up with a plan to combat that loneliness and to get more active and get more involved. And, whether that's going to meetings or just reaching out to your friends, because the fact of the matter is, when people are struggling with an addiction, very often they tend to isolate themselves. And I think a reason why people do that is because when you're alone, there's no one there to judge you about your drinking, and no one there to stop you, and no one there to hold you accountable or to make you feel bad or to keep you in check. And that's why people who are struggling, they need people to be around them, but they push everyone away because they want to be left to their own devices so that they can continue to indulge in their addiction and it's just extremely unhealthy, and it's something that everyone needs to be aware of when dealing with addiction and attempting to get sober. So the next thing on the list that I came up with is the fact that you are attempting to get sober for reasons other than doing it for yourself, right? So what's an example of this? It might be because you got arrested and now you're on probation and you're getting drug tested and you're being monitored and you're not supposed to do certain things. Or maybe it's because you're having problems in your relationship and your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, whatever, wants you to quit. Or you have children and you know that you're doing them a massive disservice by indulging in your addiction and you want to quit for them, or for your whatever, right? There are a lot of reasons why people would feel compelled to quit using alcohol or drugs, but the reality is, while those may be very good reasons, what I've seen personally is that until you come to the decision yourself that this is fucked up and I need to stop doing this, and whether that's because you've hit rock bottom or you're just fed up with yourself or you're ashamed or you're embarrassed or anything like that, until you arrive at that decision solely on your own volition, right? Like no one's forcing you to do it, no outside factors, it has to come from inside, right? You have to decide for yourself that this is what I want, this is what I'm gonna do, this is the right thing for me, and I need to do it. And it's really as simple as that, right? I know everyone's heard the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And that is so fucking true when we're talking about getting sober. You guys, I've had people in my life who wanted me to quit doing things, and it never really mattered to me how much somebody else wanted me to do something. Even if I love them and I care about them, I didn't quit doing drugs and drinking until I came to that decision on my own. And I think that's going to be true for most people in these types of situations. So that's number two. You're attempting to quit for reasons other than yourself, right? All right. So the third one on the list as to why people fail in their sobriety. And guys, this is going to hurt some feelings, but the truth is, because you lack discipline in many areas of your life. Now guys, there's a quote that I heard a nutritionist say once, and I think it's true, and I think it applies. And that is, if you can control the things that you put in your mouth, then you can control every aspect of your life. And of course, when a nutritionist says that, they're speaking in regards to food and diet and that sort of thing. But let's be honest, alcohol is something that we all put in our mouths when we're drinking, right? If we're gonna take it literally, it applies, right? And you guys, I'll be honest, right? I think the lack of discipline is probably one of the biggest reasons why people fail in their sobriety. And I've said that to people and they say, oh, well, you're being very judgmental, and oh, I don't like the way that makes me feel. But the truth hurts, guys, and it's true, because sure, there is an element of like physical dependency. I don't think that is really the case for the majority of people who are trying to get sober. And even if it is the case for you in particular, or somebody that you know, yeah, you need some medical intervention at that point, right? But that is a pretty short-lived process. And the reality is, it takes discipline and honesty with yourself to even admit that you need to go and seek that help from a professional. But beyond that, ultimately, it boils down to, quitting drinking is as easy as not fucking having a drink, right? Now, yeah, there's a lot of emotional stuff and all these marketing and social aspects to it and everything like that. But really, when you boil it down, it's as simple as not consuming alcohol. I think it's not all that common that you see people who struggle to quit drinking, but then they exude discipline in other areas of their life. It's not typically, now of course I'm not making these blanket statements, but typically you don't see somebody who is reckless with their drinking, but they're financially responsible, they're responsible parents, they're, responsible with their health in terms of what they're eating and their exercising. It's just uncommon that somebody is going to be extremely disciplined in all aspects of their life, but be out of control with their drinking or their drug consumption. So I think that applies to most people, if I'm being honest. And, the good news is discipline is something that we can all work on, right? You might not be the most disciplined person today, but that doesn't mean you can't be mindful and be aware of that and be actively working on becoming a more disciplined individual. So I'll leave that there. All right, guys, so the fourth reason why people fail in their attempts at sobriety is because they're using alcohol or drugs to self-medicate. And when I say self-medicate, I'm not only referring to emotional pain, but to physical pain. Like myself, for example, I don't want to say it certainly wasn't the main reason or the only reason why I drank and abused drugs, but it was a big reason, and that was because I was in a lot of physical pain, right? I have a lot of back pain and neck pain and, just from years of skateboarding and welding and, just injuries I've accumulated over the years, that I have some pretty chronic pain conditions. And, at times it can be pretty debilitating. And if I'm being honest, a lot of nights I would just pour up stiff mixed drinks and smoke a bunch of weed, and it would provide me some temporary relief from the pain that I was feeling. And that can be a very powerful motivator for somebody to continue drinking and to continue using drugs. And I think sometimes even more powerful than the physical pain is the emotional pain that people feel. And let's just be honest, guys. There are a lot of people out there who have experienced a lot of really traumatic things in their lives, and not everybody deals with it the same, and not everybody is as capable as dealing with those things in a healthy way or a productive way. And a lot of times when you see somebody who is, struggling with their alcohol, there's a good chance that they have some pretty deep-rooted issues emotionally, whether that's trauma or just whatever, right? It could be a lot of things. And that's the reality, right? And I think the reason a lot of people struggle to get sober is because once they're not using those drugs and alcohol to numb those feelings, it gets real, and it gets real fast. And, if you're not prepared to deal with that in a healthy way, then you're going to revert back to using substances. And the fifth and final reason why I think people really struggle and ultimately fail in their attempts at sobriety is because they're scared of change, guys. A lot of times people just become so comfortable in their routines of abusing drugs and alcohol that they have legitimate terror when they think about life, what life will be like without that. Like myself, I'll use myself as an example, right? I started doing drugs when I was 13 years old, and I started drinking pretty shortly after that. And basically, I never stopped until recently. So for the entirety of my adult life, I had always relied on drugs and alcohol to cope with all the feelings that I had and all the issues. And like I've spoken on before, it really stunted me developmentally in a multitude of ways. And I think that happens to a lot of people, right? And I think it happens to people who are much older than me, right? I was 32 or 33 when I got sober. And, I know people in their 50s and 60s who they can't imagine life without their booze and their weed and their pills and all that shit, right? And it's like, the reality is, life is going to be so much better without that stuff, but it's really hard to make people see that and accept that. And, it's sad, but I think what this one boils down to is people are scared to accept the reality of their situation, right? So a lot of times when people are like really having trouble getting sober, even though they really need to, they have, in their drunken stupor and their, drug-induced states over the course of years, they have really made a lot of horrible decisions that has gotten them to a place in life that is very unsustainable. You know, a lot of times they're struggling financially. They have ruined a lot of relationships, both professionally and personally. You know, they may have had a lot of sexual encounters that they regret. They might have a criminal record, you know, a whole multitude of things that can be very hard to accept the reality of. But not accepting something doesn't change the fact that it is, right? You have to accept reality. And that's part of getting sober, right? And part of the reason why people abuse drugs and alcohol so heavily and refuse to quit is because once they do quit, you know, they have to face those things. And in my experience, and I think in a lot of other people's experience, it's never as bad as we tend to blow them up in our minds, right? It's like, and it actually feels really good to deal with things that are uncomfortable or that you've been putting off. So guys, I'm not gonna belabor the point too much more. So yeah, guys, those are the top 5 reasons why I think people fail in their attempts at sobriety. Hopefully you can relate to some of what I'm saying. You can recognize some of those within yourself, and you know, you can just work to overcome them. And guys, like always, I really appreciate you taking the time to check out the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.